Guys, we made it to part 4, and I have an important announcement pertaining to the Jack Black series. This is crucial information. I recently found out via Instagram that the events of the story are actually taking place in like the 1890s. And I checked into it, and god damn it if that guy wasn't right, and I'm just a total fucking dumbass. The book was written in the 1930s. The events taking place, 1890s. Makes sense why he's taking a bath in a fucking barbershop. My bad. But, what do you say? Let's get into part 4. What's up, guys? Turns out I actually recorded about 47 minutes of audio of the Jack Black series before leaving for vacation, hoping I'd have it to come home to edit and put it back out. But it turns out I recorded through my laptop microphone, and it sounded like fucking shit. All right, guys? You know how fucking much of a bummer that is. But guess what? What do we do when life gets us down? When life kicks us right in our fucking pussies, what do? We absorb the shock. Life ripples the flesh of our big fat pussies, and we take it. We go, oh shit, you just fucking kicked me right in my pussy, dude. Fuck. Oh. And we get back up, and we record Jack Black Part 4, whether our pussy's aching or not. So we left off with Jack and Foot and a Half George about to knock off what they think is the softest box ever. If you don't know what a soft box is, go the fuck back to part 1. It means a safe that's easy to crack. So the problem is the job's in a small town somewhere, kind of far away, and there's no trains nearby. I think the nearest train is like 40 miles. So they got to get a horse. They got to steal some horses. That's the key to the getaway. So they can ride some horses out, through the night and just get far enough away from town to not get rustled up by the law. So that Sunday, Jack and George get into town, wait till things get settled, and then they go to the livery, they sneak in, and they saddle a few horses for their getaway. They're horse thieving, which, it's pretty dishonorable, but you got to do what you got to do. And after the horses are situated, then they get to work. And remember, this is a courthouse. They're going into the treasury within a courthouse of a little 2-bit town, a little backwater abode, and they're going to steal all of the money from the town. So they set up some dynamite around the safe in the treasury, within the courthouse. And around 2 a.m., they blow the box. Boom! The explosion is deafening in the silence of the night, but apparently no one stirs. George goes back into the courthouse and comes out with a heavy sack of gold and a fat stack of greenbacks. And they go to get their horses. They had them all saddled up, but George's horse is acting up. It won't go. George is holding the reins, going, come on, you son of a bitch. And Jack even smacks the horse in the ass, but all to no avail. Finally, George drops the horse's reins and goes for his gun. Jack looks up and he hears a man say, "Here, you damn horse thief!" And a shotgun erupts twice. Foot and a Half George gets blasted, blown off of his feet with the shotgun. Jack runs out of the livery and finds a cellar door to a general store where he can hide out. Now everybody's awake. The town is just on fire above Jack with people running around like, what the hell's going on? He can hear people frantically moving about. Jack goes, I'm not getting out of this basement for a while. So he digs in, puts in a full day's shift among boxes of nails and sacks of flour and other non-perishables. And finally night comes. After a full day of just sitting there, standing there like a goddamn statue in a basement, probably terrified. Just hours of just sitting in a basement like a little fucking frightened mouse. It's terrifying to think about. It's the 1890s, dude. You're just in a basement. Your boy just got his head blown off. And you hear everyone like, where the hell are these damn horse thieves? And you're like, oh shit, fuck. Finally the sun goes down. The moon has come up. Jack is hungry and thirsty and probably kind of spent. And he decides to make a break for it when all of a sudden he hears the cellar doors bang above him. A padlock was secured, locking him in. Jack is like, motherfucker. Finally, around midnight, when everybody's sleeping again, Jack goes up the stairs and into the store, and he crushes some cheese and chugs water from a bucket, decent meal, and then slips out of a window and hikes out of town. No horse, he's got to walk. And once Jack's far enough out of town, he plants his stack of cash, which, by the way, George gave to him. George had the gold, Jack had the cash. So Jack still has this fat stack of cash, plants it in the ground, and he finds some bushes he can sleep in. Finally, he can chill in some bushes. It takes Jack 4 days of steady hiking in which all he eats are like fruits from the farms along the way and tries to hunt some small game. So Jack takes $100 out of his stash, buries the rest, and he reads the paper. And while reading the paper, he finds out that the man who owned the livery, the horse stable that they were stealing the horses from, was only awake because he was about to go duck hunting. And he had only shot George because George had reached for his pistol. That's what I guess the guy said in the newspaper. The gold that George had taken amounted to $2,000 and was returned to the treasury. But the hunt was still on for the missing cash and the accomplice. Jack vowed to not get caught and also not lose the money since George had lost his life over it. George was never identified. He was buried unnamed and unknown. Jack digs up his cash and buys a ticket for Chicago and grabs some clothes and spends the winter in Chicago. And of course, he hangs out in the shittiest places possible, like those wine dumps, opium dens, gambling spots. And Jack plays a little bit of faro, but not enough to hurt him. And eventually, while Jack's just being a gentleman in Chicago with, a little bit of money, he comes across a beaten down, shivering prostitute. And Jack said this lady was so shabby that people would barely cast a glance at her. Like Julia, Jack says, this lady was almost ready for the river. But Jack, again, obviously with the soft spot for the prostitutes, puts her up in a room of her own, feeds her, gets her some decent threads, and after some time, the lady actually goes back to work, fortified by the acts of Jack's kindness. She's got some weight back on her. She's got some new threads. She's not looking so bad. She gets back to her craft. She starts putting out content on her Patreon once again. And everyone's pumped. Her energized community rallies around her. So one night, this formerly busted, now probably okay-looking prostitute goes back and pays Jack all the money that he had spent on her to kind of help her out. And all's well, Jack said, hey, I'm happy for you. I'm glad to help. You go do your thing, man. Again, he never gets head. Right? It's like, dude. Jack, by the way, maybe he's just being kind of like a gentleman. He doesn't talk about getting pussy at all. He's never gotten pussy, at least that we know of. He's just like gambling and smoking opium, which, all right, I can see that. Kind of nasty, but like, bro, get some fucking pussy, man. So either way, after the prostitute pays him back, that next night, she hits him up, tells Jack she needs some help. There's a dead guy in her room. Jack goes to her spot. Sure enough, there is definitely a dead guy laying there in a suit in her bed. So Jack, again, what a gentleman, lifts up the dead guy onto his shoulder and takes him out into the back alley and tosses him down. He tells Annie, by the way, that's the prostitute's name, to sweep her house and to look for anything that might link her to that guy and get rid of it. Jack leaves her spot and resolves to see no more of Annie, but the two shall, unfortunately, meet again. So finally, summer comes and Jack enjoys the World Fair. He says he has a blast, but it does put a dent in his bankroll. I don't know what the hell he was buying there, but he must have been buying some pretty sick inventions. So after the summer goes, fall's coming, Jack heads back west, ditching his soft, easy life for the road once again. He needs to hustle up some more fucking paper. He don't like that bankroll dwindling, man. His boy died for it. He's like, all right, let's get some motors, baby. Let's get some motors, bro. Let's get some motors, guac. So it's autumn now. Jack's somewhere in the Dakotas, riding trains, trying to find somewhere to go, something to do. And he sees these swarms of migrant workers just finishing up their work on the season's harvest. And he starts telling us that during this time, a lot of bums and yeggs just swarm to those areas during that time of year to prey on these migrant farmhands who get paid after the harvest. I guess you work all summer, and then they give you like the whole kit and caboodle after they sell all their fruit or whatever. Sounds like a terrible fucking idea. But according to Jack, the migrant farmhands, which are known as blanket stiffs, or are you ready for this? Gay cats. We finally figured out what gay cats are. When they have those conventions and they got to kick out all of the fucking gay cats and other fucking two-middle-a-doos or whatever they were calling people back then. A farm laborer is a gay cat. So if you're in the jungle at a convention with bums and they figure out you're a farm laborer, they go, yo, bro, get the fuck out of here, you square-ass motherfucker. So Jack starts telling us of this little scheme. He never did it, but he starts telling us about other bums who join forces or link up with the crew on the trains. And they have a little thing going on where they let the gay cats on, the migrant farm workers, with their lump sum of their entire summer's pay. And the train people tell the bums, like, yo, this room, we got a migrant farm guy. We got a gay cat. And the bum would come in at night and just rob all of his money. And the train would come to a stop and they would just kick the guy off the train and be like, get the fuck out. So imagine you just worked all summer. You got all your hard earned. Someone comes in while you're sleeping, takes it from you, grabs you, just like, get the fuck out of here. The train stops, boom, boots you off. You're now in Butte, Montana with no money. That would ruin your whole fucking life. But either way, that sucks. And by the way, this little scheme, this is called catting up. Just going in and preying on gay cats. You can go, I'm heading to the Dakotas, I'm going to cat up. So Jack's just kind of bumping around this city and that city, meeting up with old acquaintances and telling them what happened to him and George. And eventually, one night while in Montana, Jack feels an icy breeze and realizes that winter's coming. And at this point, he's almost broke, and so he just makes a dash for the coast into British Columbia. While in a hotel in British Columbia, Jack spies a safe in the lobby. And the safe was of a make that him and George had beaten a dozen times. No dynamite needed. Jack puts his last dollar on a full week stay at that hotel and decides he's going to crack that safe. And more importantly, he's going to finally become a master of his trade. It's just him on this job. No more apprenticing. Jack would be the journeyman thief. So Jack starts casing the thing up, planning his getaway. He figures, all right, hotel closes at midnight. Last train leaves at 1 a.m. That gives me an hour to beat the box and then grab a train to America. Easy. But again, Jack is totally broke. He put down his last dollar on his room and board. So he decides to hit someone else's room real quick just for some pocket change. So he goes to prowl the only other hotel in town, and he sees a cracked door one night. Jack slips in. He sees 2 beds, someone sleeping in one of them, and he spies the guy's trousers hanging on a chair. Bingo. Jack goes to pillage his trousers, no diddy, and gets a wallet. So nice. Jack's got some money. He goes, all right, this is looking pretty good. Then he sees the shape of someone else sleeping in the next bed, and he goes to see if he can pick their pockets too. But when he touches their leg, it's all furry. Jack is like, what the fuck? Turns out it's a dog, and it instantly snaps awake and bites down on Jack's arm, latching securely. The sleeper wakes up, and Jack tells him that he'll blow his head off if he gets out of bed, and then Jack drags the dog, who's still biting his arm, out into the hallway, and then decides to take it down the steps and outside where he can shake it loose without waking up anybody else. But the struggling, biting beast trips Jack up, and they both tumble down the stairs. Finally, the dog lets go and scrambles out into the alley and just starts howling and barking and carrying on. And Jack just bolts. He gets back to his room, and he's pumped to learn the dog didn't really hurt him too bad, and also that he snagged a decent amount from the guy's wallet. That next night, Jack, being a little curious about what kind of dog had bitten him, went back to the bar of the hotel that he had room rated in and spied a dog sitting under a man's feet at a poker game. It was half husky, half shepherd. Jack says that the dog started growling up at him, but no one noticed. Jack dipped out and never went back into that place again. Which, by the way, what a fucking dummy mission. I gotta see what kind of dog bit me. It's like, how about you fucking don't, man? Why the fuck? And also, you shook off a half shepherd, half husky. It was just hanging on your arm, and you're like, yeah, it didn't even hurt me. It's like, Finally, the big night comes. It's time to crack the safe. A few sturdy blows from the sledgehammer does the trick. Jack grabs the money out of the safe, snags the 1 a.m. train. Everything is chill. Jack's riding the train. He's like, oh, hell yeah, I'm about to go back to America. I got all this motherfucking money. Hell yeah. And then the train stopped for like a half an hour. An avalanche had buried the tracks. Jack panics, instantly doing the math. He goes, oh my God, any constable worth his salt is going to realize that the thief would be on this very train. But there was nowhere to go. Heading into the snow would be suicide. If he tried to get off the train and run, he'd die. So Jack buried the cash in the seat of another car, and then went back to his own seat and just waited. And the train just sits there all night, and sure enough, the next morning, the constables come aboard the train, talk to the conductor, examine the paper money the conductor had gotten for tickets. Conductor points to Jack, and the constables turn around and point their guns and arrested him in the Queen's name. Jack submits to a search, pleased that he chose to hide the extra money. They don't have anything on him, so he thinks. So Jack is brought before the magistrate for trial. And apparently the $20 bill Jack used to buy the train ticket was given to the hotel by an old gold prospector who had held that bill for so long that he'd memorized the serial number on it. And it was also like an old, weird bill. Like, you know, if you got paid with a $2 bill, you'd be like, oh, you might remember the guy who gave it to you. And if Jack had used any other bill in the bankroll he took from the hotel, he would have been fine. They all would have been virtually indistinguishable. He would have totally gotten away with it. But they had that old prospector come to court, and the prospector testified that he had indeed spent that very 20 in the hotel. And then the conductor claimed that Jack gave him the same 20, and so the whole case was open shut. Jack goes back to jail. But he's in a little holding cell just awaiting his sentencing, and the officer in charge of his little holding cell area was this drunk Scotsman who was helped by 2 Native American boys who were both serving 6-month sentences. And it's not that bad. The cell is nice and warm, and Jack gets to bathe once a week, so again, he's kind of chilling, but it's just like so boring. The only thing in the cell is just a blanket and a bucket for him to do his business in. Jack begs the officer for something to read. He goes, please, man, I got nothing to do. Give me something to read. He's given a Bible. Jack reads the Bible dutifully, but as he says, to no effect. Then one day, the prosecutor comes in and tells Jack, he goes, look, buddy, if you fess up and tell us where the remaining money is, I think it was like $800, we'll take it easy on you. Jack tells the prosecutor to pound sand, hoping that one of the cleaners on the train finds it instead. Jack spends the next couple of weeks reading his Bible every day and praying every night that the conductor falls under the train so he can't testify against him. Then one day a priest comes by to talk to Jack, and Jack notices the priest carrying a little pamphlet. And the pamphlet's a little trader's guide to help people speak Chinook, a dialect of the local natives. Jack asks the priest if he can have the pamphlet. The priest goes, yeah, sure, young man. Very studious of you. Here you go. Jack studies the pamphlet day and night and starts practicing Chinook with the 2 native bros who work for the Scotsman. And then one night, the Scotsman, who's just an absolute drunk, he's hammered. He opens Jack's cell and says, I got something for you, boy, and tosses a Chinese kid in there with him, thinking it's going to be some kind of punishment. But remember, Jack loves Chinese people. And also, this Chinese guy speaks 0 English, but does understand and speak some Chinook. So Jack hits it off with the Chinese kid, and soon enough, they're teaching each other their respective languages, using Chinook as kind of like a home base. The warden was even nice enough to give Jack some paper and a pencil to do these little language lessons with. But then one night, the warden got drunk and just ordered the Native Americans to take Jack's paper and pencil away for whatever reason. But it's too late. The language lessons have already taken enough to the point where Jack convinces his cellmate that they have to escape from jail. And his plan's actually pretty good. So they're in a cell, the window's barred. Jack tells his cellmate, all we have to do is get a hacksaw and just cut these bars out little by little. One night, we'll just push them, pop them out, we're out of here. And he tells his China bro, he goes, look, have your cousins, who apparently visit frequently, have them buy us a couple of saws from the hardware store and slip them to us during the visit. And they pull it off. Hacksaws are acquired and stowed. Now all they have to do is wait till spring and then pull off the plan. And the reason they have to wait till spring is in case it's too cold and they can't catch a train. You need the warm weather if you got to do a long hike. So spring finally comes and it's time for the escape. And Jack's feeling pretty confident about the escape, but he is worried about the native bros. He knows he can get away from the drunken Scot. That's easy. but says that the native bros, you really got to watch those guys because they're like hyper aware of whatever's going on. And so for weeks, Jack and his Chinese friend do a little bit of sawing on the bars every night, just little by little, securing the saws back in a crack in the floor and getting some rest. Until finally, one night, the work is done. Jack snaps the bars out of the window, helps the Chinese guy get out. Jack follows behind. So they hit the train station and spring the door on a battered boxcar, and the train takes off and after a day gets into Vancouver. Jack gets off the train, pillages the train's break room to snag some of the workers' threads because they're in like a prison uniform. They're like totally, oh brother, where art thou? Dressed like the Hamburglar. So Jack takes some of the railroad workers' clothes so they can kind of blend in. And he dresses the Chinese guy up, and the guy's clothes are just like way too big. And he's like, look, we can't be seen together. We look like a really weird pair. Your clothes are too big. You're looking suspicious. I'm looking suspicious. Let's split up. So Jack sends his Chinese bro off to Chinatown. And then Jack goes another way, kind of just slinking about. Weirdly enough, as Jack recalls, as the church bells are ringing, a dense fog descends on the town. Jack, thankful for the fog, moves through it undetected, but he has no idea where he's going. And finally, he sees this old dog get up off a porch. And Jack says the dog looks at him with almost human eyes. And Jack, perhaps a bit delirious, decides to follow this dog as it gets up upon seeing him and walked back in through the open door to, I guess, the house it belonged to. Jack sneaks in behind the dog and sees a guy passed out drunk on the floor. Jack immediately hits his trousers and is surprised to find a good amount of money in every pocket of his pants. Jack leaves the man a piece of silver so he can get a drink when he gets up and walks past the old mutt who, again, is just eyeing Jack with this, weird knowingness. So Jack takes his money, hits a sailor's boarding house, gets a room, chows down, and buys some new clothes, ditching his railroad threads in the harbor. So once Jack's all set up, he decides to hit Chinatown looking for his friend at the company house that his bro told him to meet him at. But when Jack gets there, everyone acts like they don't know what he's talking about. Jack tells them all, look, man, it's all good, but for real, I know that my friend's here and I'd really like to see him. And Jack tells him, he goes, look, man, I'm not a cop. I'm just trying to bro down China style. And then finally, after some finagling, a well-dressed Chinese elder comes out and tells Jack that he knows who he is and tells Jack, come with me. The man takes Jack into this weird old building full of people smoking opium, gambling, and cooking fish. Finally, Jack gets to a back room within this place, and there's his bro, Chu-Chi. By the way, that's his name. His China bro's name, Chu-Chi. So the old man tries to pay Jack for his service of getting his bro out of jail, but Jack tells him, he's like, look, man, I don't want your money. I only want to make friends. The old man tells Jack, he goes, come back here the next day and I'll have something for you. So Jack goes and chills with Chu-Chi and his cousins, and they just smoke some opium, and Jack says he sleeps like a baby. So Jack never sees Chu-Chi again, but he does go back to the old man's shop, and he receives a company letter stating that Jack is indeed employed by his shop. Jack thinks nothing of it, but claims that this letter gets him out of trouble later on, which it does. And then Jack goes off into this little spiel about how he still, at this point, has never considered counting his lucky stars and going straight. And he attributes this to what he calls, quote, youthful egotism, which is nothing but confidence born of ignorance. And he said, this part of myself whispered just deep in my psyche that I could beat a game that I knew to be wrong and full of dangers. Which is kind of interesting to think about. It's like, dude, you've had two of your friends get shot to death right in front of you. And you're still somehow thinking like, nah, man, I'm going to figure this out. And I'm going to somehow live a good life out of a bad life, basically. I'm going to beat the game. But either way, Jack is basically saying that he is still fully on his bullshit. Death, jail, sickness, none of this is enough to make Jack reconsider. Like he says, he's convinced he can beat the game. And so he goes on. And so one night, Jack's kind of prowling around Vancouver, looking for some new job, something he can steal. And eventually bumps into a guy he knew from Salt Lake. And the guy tells Jack about a small opium den owned by a Chinese guy. His wife had bought some opium earlier that day and handed the guy a large bill and watched him go back and make change out of a small box that he kept beneath the floor. All Jack had to do was break in and get the box. Simple. So Jack scopes out the spot. It's not as simple as the guy made out. True, the guy keeps money in a box under the floor, but what the guy didn't tell Jack was that the old Chinese shop owner sleeps right above the money, along with a bunch of other Chinese bros. The wife suggests that Jack use some chloroform. Jack decides to give it a shot. So one night, Jack sneaks in through the window of the opium den, and the room is just a tangled mess of China bros snoring and wheezing, and Jack maneuvers around, finds the elder bro, douses the rag in chloroform, and puts the bottle back in his pocket. Jack puts the rag to the old man's nose, and the old man just stirs a little bit and rolls over. Jack decides that he needs some more, so he reaches over and holds the stuff near his nose again, and the old man just rolls over again. Jack starts bugging out. He's like, oh man, this isn't working, but let me give it one more try. Holds the rag in front of the old man's face, and the dude just bolts upright and just goes, ah! Everyone wakes up freaking out. The old man grabs Jack's arm. Jack wrestles himself free, but now the young bros are activated and they just beat the shit out of Jack. So they hog-tie Jack and just kind of have him like sitting on a box. And the old man picks up the rag and sniffs it, and he asks Jack, what for this? Jack tells him, this is like, by the way, this is how the book narrates it. I'm just giving you guys a genuine experience. So he asks Jack, what for this? Jack tells him it's medicine to make him sleep. The old man asks Jack, what for sleep? Jack tells him, I'm trying to take your money. The dude lifts the floorboard, checks his stash, it's all there. He tells one of the young bros to call the police. Jack tells him not to do that and tells them, he goes, I am a good man and I'm friends with Chu Chi. He tells him, he goes, check my pocket. There's a letter in there. So the old man goes in Jack's pocket, finds the letter, and he asks Jack, he goes, why are you a good man? So then Jack, while hogtied on a box, says, maybe me good man, maybe me bad man. But no more money, no more eat. I see your house and steal your money, but no police. You kill me, but no police. Maybe good man, maybe bad man. I don't know, but no police. Pretty sick speech. So they untie Jack, and then one guy just holds a meat cleaver up to his head in case he tries something, and they tell him to get the fuck out. Jack asks for his letter back, but the old man crumbles it and tells him to go out now. Once Jack is outside, he smashes the bottle of chloroform against a building and walks back to the cottage of his Salt Lake contacts and tells them that the job was a bust. Jack, now filled with shame for letting down that Chinese boss who gave him the letter, couldn't bear to be in Vancouver, hops the train back to America. Thinking he had found an empty passenger car, Jack realizes that he is in a luxurious private train car. So he sneaks about in the dark and he sees a big fat man rolled up in blankets sleeping in a bed. Jack spies a wallet, a wad of cash, and a gold watch. Jack snags all three, the wallet, the cash, and the watch, and hops on top of the train car. Once the train stops at a junction, he gets off, but there's only a westbound car coming. Jack hops the westbound car back to Vancouver, where he plants the watch, counts the money, turns out it's enough to last him 6 months, and then inspects the wallet, but there's no money in the wallet, just a bunch of important papers and personal documents. Jack learns that the wallet belongs to a high-ranking railroad official and figures that they will be searching high and low for him in the morning. Jack thinks about burning the wallet, but then decides that maybe he can somehow return it. No sense in troubling the man unnecessarily by keeping his important papers. So Jack takes his money, grabs some new clothes, and grabs a ticket back to British Columbia. He also mails the wallet back to the man he stole it from, and then goes on a little spiel about how everyone, even thieves, should really try to put themselves in other people's shoes. Without doing this, Jack says, you're an incomplete person and you're hopeless. This is why Jack mailed the wallet back. He said he felt bad enough for the losers on the bad end of his crimes and was always glad to offer any small relief to the suffering he inflicted on others through his shitty acts. So Jack spends a little time in Victoria, British Columbia, links up with some new Chinese bros, works smuggling opium for a little bit, has a couple of nice months, and then one night, Jack falls to the faro tables again and loses all the money he saved up. Apparently, Jack was sitting there doing mental bets where he would like watch people play and he'd be like, this is what I would do. And every one of his mental bets won. As soon as he put up money, he just started losing. Dude's got no cash. So now he's desperate. He's got to take the first job he sees. He strolls the city looking for wealthy houses and finally slips in through a window, snags some cash out of a sleeping man's room, and dips out. Jack goes and sits down at a nearby diner to get some grub since he's pretty hungry. And in the middle of the meal, two guys walk in with two officers and accuse Jack of being the thief. The one guy, the guy who was sleeping, is actually a lawyer, and he said that one of his servants saw Jack slipping out the window. They search Jack, find the money the guy was missing. Jack is now back in Canadian jail, which is bad news since he figures he might get sent back to the spot he escaped from, which would then be a double whammy. So Jack chills in the holding cell trying to figure out what to do, and then the door gets unlocked. He's handed a bucket and a mop by a Native American guy, one of the Native American trustees from the place he had escaped from a few months prior. Jack's blood runs cold when he sees this guy. He goes, oh shit, is this guy gonna be cool? Please let this guy be cool. But then the Native American guy snitches instantly. Another officer comes back, shackles Jack in leg irons, and then a few days later, the original drunk Scottish guard from the jail he escaped from comes to the jail that Jack's currently at and tells Jack that he is basically fucked. He's coming back with the Scottish drunk guy. And before Jack leaves with the drunk Scottish guy, the dude who he stole from stops by and breaks Jack off with a book. The book's called It's Never Too Late to Mend by this guy, Charles something. Let me see actually what his name is. It's Never Too Late to Mend by Charles Reed. He also gives Jack some money and wishes him the best. So Jack is taken back to his original cell and then totally deflated to see that the cell had been renovated to be completely escape-proof. And Jack is kept in leg shackles at all times and then enters into this game of psychological warfare with his Scottish prison guard. First, the Scotsman takes Jack's book the lawyer gave him just to be a dick. And he also moved his cot so he could sleep right next to Jack's cell. So Jack, in response, starts sleeping during the day so that he can stay up all night and make noise while the guard is sleeping. So then the Scotsman gets a large stick he uses to poke Jack while he was sleeping during the day and making sure to wake him up every 30 minutes. Finally, Jack relents and says, dude, I'm done. I'm done fucking with you. I'm just going to chill. It's over. And then the Scotsman, just to be a dick, takes his Bible. Jack tells the Salvation Army representative that the Scotsman took his Bible and they tell him to give it back. So then the guard's pissed off about that, so he goes around town telling everybody that Jack murdered the Chinese boy he helped escape. And Jack says that this apparently fucked him, this nasty rumor about him. He said that this messed up his chances of getting off light with a jury trial because he's like, everyone in town thinks I murdered a Chinese guy. So Jack elects a speedy trial, which is basically a step up from pleading guilty. You just say, I don't want a jury. And you just guys, do your thing. So Jack gets his day in court, and he is charged with the original charge of stealing from the hotel, and then the double charge of escaping, and then the other charge. I guess he got triple charge, and then, stealing from the lawyer too. So Jack gets his sentence finally, 2 years and 30 lashes. Remember, he's in under British jurisdiction. So you get 2 years and 30 lashes. And Jack is just like, fuck, he's miserable. He's totally on the rocks. He's like, it's my fucking dad's fault. It's this guy's fault. It's this motherfucker. This guy fucked me. He's thinking of everyone who's ever fucked him, who's ever let him down. It's everybody's fault but his. But then after some time, Jack does finally realize that he goes, I have no one to blame but myself. He's like, I entered into this life on my own accord. And he tells himself, he goes, and I can get out of it the same way. Only Jack at this point still has no intention of doing so. But the thought of one day going straight does start to bring him some much needed comfort. So Jack is taken to a place called New Westminster, where he'll be in jail for 2 years, which was weirdly enough the place of Jack's birth. Jack's dad had actually been stationed there for work, and that town is where Jack was born. And when Jack gets to the New Westminster prison, he's told that he'll receive 15 lashes once he gets in, and then 15 more the day before he gets out. And he's told that his final 15 lashes can be reduced if he acts right, but the first 15 are going to be pretty wicked. So Jack gets settled into his new cell. He has a couple days to assimilate. And also, this jail holds it down almost like Quaker style. It's like you're by yourself. You got to be silent. If you get caught talking, if you're making any noise, you're fucked. You can still see other people. It's not solitary confinement. You just can't talk out loud to each other. So one morning, Jack's taken into a room. A doctor examines him and tells him to take off his shirt. Jack then has his wrist strapped to this like tripod thing, and then his feet strapped down as well. And a dude with a big leather strap just kind of winds it up, and Jack promises himself to bite his tongue and take it like a man. And that strap comes down, and Jack said it felt like a bolt of lightning. He doesn't yell out, but he said he does squirm like a weakling. He wanted to kind of like pop his back out and be like, yeah, fucking give it to me. But he said it totally caved in, and by the end, he's just kind of like shaking, totally defeated. Whipped dog status, which I'm not judging the man. I'd be pretty upset if somebody whipped me in the back, if someone whipped me in the back 15 times. There's also something particularly just undesirable about having British people whip you. Take it like a man. Righto, swap. Don't cower like a girl. I couldn't take that. So Jack gets 3 days to heal up and is assigned to a farm gang. And apparently at this place, the prisoners had to grow all of the food that they ate. And Jack said the food was good. There was plenty of fresh vegetables, grains, and even got a little bit of meat. And he said the food was coarse, wasn't the tastiest, but it was nutritious. And in this prison, they couldn't have tobacco or coffee, but they did drink something called pea coffee, which was also grown by the prisoners. But they would grow peas and dry them out and then powderize them. And Jack said the stuff didn't taste the best, but it was very good for you. He said everyone in this jail was healthy and no one died while he was in there. This place was, for the most part, pretty chill, according to Jack. But like we said, they had this rule of silence. You can't talk, you can't yell out. No chatter. And one day, while in this prison, Jack sees who but Soldier Johnny and instinctively cries out to his boys like, "What's up, Soldier Johnny?" He just gets snatched up, tossed into his cell, and given 3 days bread and water. They didn't have like a hole or solitary confinement. So what they did was they would take everything out of your room and then put these big pieces of wood over your gate so you didn't get any light. And you had to sit in your room by yourself for as long as they said, and all you could have was bread and water. So Jack spent 3 days in total darkness and never got to talk to Johnny. He actually didn't see him for years. But the bread and water treatment did teach Jack that he didn't really need that much food. He also claims that we'd all be happier and healthier if we ate half as much and just chewed what we ate for twice as long. Kind of a sick life hack. So the little like solitary bread and water confinement in his cell triggered something in Jack, and he became something of a rebel. He would just like yell out and sing, knowing it was going to make the guards spaz. And he would get, back to bread and water, back to your room. He said he didn't really mind it. He would just sit in the dark and just kind of like chill. He also refused to work on 4th of July. In celebration of American independence. That was kind of like a fuck you to the English. And on that time, he got sentenced to 12 days of bread and water. And then on the Queen's birthday, they told him they can like chill and take a day off the farm. Jack goes, nope, I'd like to work. 12 more days of bread and water. And he keeps doing this shit on and on. He would just start just yelling and just fucking around. And after getting constantly locked in his cell on B&W, he finally knocks it off. He's like, fuck, dude, this sucks. I'm done. I thought I liked chilling in a dark room and drinking water and eating bread. It turns out it kind of fucking sucks. So he just focuses on reading instead. That becomes his new kick in jail. And apparently they had a really nice library at this place. And Jack reads everything he could find. So finally, the time comes. Jack's getting out of jail. But before he goes, he knows he has to take those lashes. So he's taken back to the room. And they fix him on that tripod thing, just get him all set up, and he's prepared to be strap attacked for a second time. And remember, in the beginning, they said, Jack, if you're good, we'll give you some soft whippings. Nothing crazy, but Jack was a bad boy, and he said those last 15 lashes were delivered with no mercy. He said every shred of peace from reading and meditative insight achieved from his solitude were beaten right out of him. So he gets sent back to his room, and he kind of cools off for a week, and then they let him go. And then as he's walking out of jail, I guess he's in a good mood, he tries to say goodbye to one of the wardens on his way out. And the warden, in front of a bunch of new prisoners, basically tells Jack to go fuck himself. Kind of bums him out, but Jack is feeling pretty good otherwise. He's got the money the lawyer sent him. He's got that on him. He's feeling healthy and fit from the rations and the work. And he goes, you know what? I'm going to go get some tobacco, roll up some cigs, and I'm going to just find a sunny, grassy knoll and just blaze some cigs and plot my next move. And Jack thinks about the whipping post and he goes, you know what? All that did was just strengthen my resolve to commit crimes. He said it kind of ingrained the fact in him, or this idea, that he was playing this game of like him versus society. And also he's like, it emboldened me because he's like, I had taken all they had to give. 2 years hard time, 30 lashes, just made me stronger. Jack is ready to rip again. So he heads back to Vancouver and falls in with some bums. They tell him of a bunch of prosperous mining towns in the interior of British Columbia. So Jack spends a week traveling around, hitting all those little mining towns, and he's killing it, just knocking places off, hitting safes, stealing stuff out of people's houses. But he's undisciplined. He's been locked up for too long. He ends up gambling, drinking, and just squandering the bag. Eventually, he gets his hands on some diamonds and decides to hitch it back to Pocatello and sell them to Salt Chunk Mary. And this was a little risky since Jack was like notorious in those parts. They said the law was hip to his tricks. But then Jack figures maybe the block won't be too hot because I've been gone for 4 years. And also he said that he was, quote, hungry for a look at Mary, for a feed of her beans and salt pork. So his baser desires got the best of him. He goes back to Pocatello. When he gets there, he knocks up on Mary's door, and a very genteel black lady answers and tells Jack that Mary moved away years ago. She said that Mary sold her the property for next to nothing and disappeared. No one knows why she left or where she went. So Jack, kind of bummed out, heads to Butte, Montana, fences the stones he stole, and he asks around about Mary's whereabouts. No one has a clue. Finally, he comes across this guy named Hannibal, who's like the eldest, wisest bum Jack knows. And they chat for a little bit, and their talk drifts to Foot and a Half George. Jack tells Hannibal all about the night when George died, and Hannibal tells Jack that his story checks out because apparently Hannibal knew another bum who got arrested around that same town the day after and actually saw George's dead body. And when the other bum came back, he told Salt Chunk Mary, and after Mary found out that George died, she packed up and rolled. Then Hannibal blows Jack's mind with the news that George and Mary were brother and sister who grew up in the same hometown as himself. Jack, completely blown away, is like, whoa, that makes so much sense. Now he knows why George pumped the bastard gold tooth full of so much lead. So Jack just drifts around. He goes on a string of house burglaries in Seattle, Spokane, and Tacoma, but the life he's living isn't great. He's getting away with all these little house burglaries, but he's like, dude, this fucking sucks. He's like, I'm really just the fence's peon. I'm doing all the hard work, the nerve-wracking shit to get ripped off, or at best a 50-50 split on the stuff that I did all the work for. And at this point, Jack is also very addicted to opium, and he claims that every burglar needs a little something to settle the nerves. He goes on this long rant about how scary it is to be a house burglar, and why every thief needs a little jolt after the job. Jack also goes on this long rant, like detailing specifically why it's scary to break into people's houses at night while they're sleeping and like dig through their pockets. And it's actually pretty cool. He goes through it like step by step of every little thing you got to think about and every little thing that can throw you off. But the idea is that sneaking around a stranger's house in the pitch black is really scary. You got to sit there and like monitor the sleepers' breathing and how sometimes they wake up, turn and drink some water from their nightstand, and you're just like sitting there in a dark corner of the room. Which I get that. Look, man, I've never broken into someone's house at night, but it's a lot like putting kids to sleep. It's like you're just kind of creeping through a dark room with like a kid you just spent 30 minutes fucking bullshitting with until eventually they just stop. And you do got to kind of creep out of the room like a 1890s burglar, just kind of like, fuck, please don't fucking move, fuck. I'll fucking kill myself if this fucking kid wakes up. There's sometimes, dude, I like put my kids down. It's a 45-minute ordeal. And you're just fucking creeping out of the room. And it's like, dude, if this kid stirs, I'm going to Bud Dwyer right in their fucking face. But either way, Jack's on the opium and wants to let the reader know that they would be too if they were in his shoes. So then Jack talks about a little job he pulls off when prowling about a hotel. He sees a big, fat, drunken gambler outside his room. And the fat man's smiling to himself as he kind of like pulls out a bankroll. Just kind of like fans the bills and inspects it before walking into his hotel room. And Jack somehow, I guess he goes outside, but he watches this man in his room from outside, curious as he sees the fat man stand up on a chair and start messing with the shades. He's kind of lowering a little bit and kind of fiddling with something, then lowering a little more, before Jack finally realizes, like, oh, he's rolling up his money in the shades. Which Jack honestly is like, dude, I've seen it all. That's a pretty great hiding spot. So then Jack goes back into the hotel, lets the man fall asleep, and after a few hours, grabs his little lock-picking tools that he had hidden in the janitor's closet, and he went and picked the lock with ease, sneaks in, grabs the cash out of the shades, and then he also hits the man's trousers, grabbing some silver, and also took his watch just as a punishment for the fat man trying to be foxy by hiding the money in the blinds. Jack gets back to his room, counts the bankroll, enough to live off for 6 months. Amazing. He hits another job the next week, doubles his money. Now he's got enough money to live for a year. He decides to take some time off and visit his father in Kansas City. It's been 10 years since he last saw his father, and figures that maybe he can use the time to get his opium habit under control. Maybe he can kick the junk. So Jack gets to Kansas City, and he's bummed to find out that none of his old bros are anywhere to be found. Slim the gambler isn't there, the guy who owned the cigar shop. Neither is a taxi driver who helped him rescue the hooker. The milkman he collected money for is gone. Jack goes to the old brothel he used to collect milk money from. That's under different ownership. So Jack heads to the railroad company that his father used to work for to see if he could find his dad, just to find out that his daddy's dead. Jack learns that his dad has been dead for 3 years after a long battle with illness and could barely afford to get a decent burial next to Jack's mother. This news served as a bit of a jolt to Jack's system. He was ashamed at how he never did anything to thank his father for raising him up, and wondered that if his absence had aggravated his father's illness, since he may have been worried about his boy. So then Jack, as a result of this self-reflection, quits opium. He also claims that he gave it up with really no problem. He said, I was smoking opium every day for a year, and my only withdrawals were like a couple of restless nights. And then he claims that he saw somebody a few months after this shaking and trembling while trying to quit, and he learned that the guy had only been smoking opium for 3 months. And Jack seems to think, this is his theory, that withdrawals are purely mental. But either way, there's nothing in Kansas City for Jack, and he heads to LA so he can spend the winter there. So he just gets there, bros down with other bums, and he's like, I'm going to get out of here in the spring. Spring comes, Jack heads back to Canada. He learns about a big mining company that does a large cash payday to the workers and decides to get up there and try to intercept the money, which came in from a different city, and then sat somewhere overnight before being dispersed the next morning. And according to Jack's sources, there should be about $5,000 in there. And oh, by the way, Jack did end up getting his gray suit finally after 10 hard years. When he was in Kansas City, he copped the gray suit so he could show up and impress his father. But then as we learned, his father was dead, so kind of a bummer, man. Jack realized his dream of a gray suit to show his dad, showed up to the railroad in a very sleek outfit, and they're like, oh yeah, dude, your dad's dead. And he was like, God fucking damn it, I feel like a dumbass now. So Jack ditches his coveted gray suit and grabs miner gear, basically overalls, denim shirt, and a cap. And Jack travels for 3 weeks and gets to his destination in Canada. Apparently, it's this tiny town of 2,000 people. So Jack is like, this is going to be easy. They're going to have a piece of shit, ratty old safe. But when he got there, he gets to kind of like case up the company HQ. He sees the safe. It's virtually unbeatable. It was the latest, greatest model. And it was also chested, meaning that it was like, there was a safe within the safe. You had to crack 2 doors. So this means it would take multiple blasts of dynamite to get into its guts. And this is tough because when one blast goes off, that'll disturb a sleeper, but usually they just go back to sleep. 2 blasts will get people out of bed. And 3, which is how many blasts Jack thinks it'll take to crack this safe, you'd have guns to your head before you could count the money. But Jack decides to hang out anyway. He's like, I want to see how this whole operation works. So he gets a room, chilling in his miner gear. And every night at 9 p.m., Jack would watch the train to see who's getting on and off. And finally, one day, he sees the guy who's carrying the cash that's supposed to go into the safe. Just a tall, serious man carrying a leather handbag. So Jack follows him to the company's headquarters and watches as the money, the leather bag full of $5,000, is put into this fortress of a safe. The next morning, Jack watches as the payroll makes its way onto a boat where it'd be taken to the miners. And by noon, Jack sits there and watches the money being doled out to miner by miner till the $5,000's gone. He goes, son of a bitch, that should have been mine. So Jack's kind of bummed out. He goes and finds an opium den, blazes up, and while in a haze, comes up with a plan. So Jack rents the room for another month, thinking I'll get the next month's shipment of money. So Jack chills for 3 weeks, and then a week before the payroll was due again, Jack went into the company's headquarters at night with a sledgehammer and wrecked the outside of the safe, knocking the combination part off and just bashing in some of the outer components, rendering it unusable for the time being. And then he went around and smashed some other stuff and ransacked the place, making sure to leave 4 crowbars on the floor with some tobacco scattered about. So it kind of looked like a crew of bums had broken in, tried to make the safe, and then trashed the place. And apparently Jack learned from the news that the next day, the police inspector came, checked out the place, and deemed it to be connected to a band of thieves who had done some other jobs out east. And the company sent the safe back to its maker for repairs. So now the safe's out of the question. So Jack's like, I'll just watch the money. See where it goes and just take it from, wherever they take it. Hopefully it's a less complicated safe. So 2 days after Jack wrecked the safe, a mounted officer was killed by a drunken Indian. So now every man in town went and joined this manhunt, which completely wiped the town's memory of Jack's attack on the safe. So Jack spent the rest of the week just kind of following this depot agent around, just kind of watching him, like, where's this guy going? Where does he live? Blah, blah, blah. He saw his house. He cased the house out. No kids or dog, just the guy and his wife. Finally, one day, the money comes in. Jack follows the guy in his leather satchel full of money all the way home. And it's Jack's luck that the guy kept the money in his house. So what would have been a safe-cracking job becomes a simple home burglary. This is Jack's bread and butter. So Jack waits until every light in the house went out and finally hit it at 1 a.m. He picked the lock on the back door, entered. He kind of went up the steps, stood outside the bedroom, listening to the people sleeping. Now, as he's outside listening to their breathing pattern, he's like, all right, where the fuck did this guy put the leather pouch? Maybe I can, visualize where this is before I even enter. Finally, Jack enters the room, looks around. He's like, it's got to be under the guy's pillow. There's no way he has this, on the floor or on a bureau. So Jack checks under his pillow, and there it is. The only problem is that the sack of cash is pretty big, and pulling something that large out from under a pillow will definitely disturb the sleeper. So Jack has to put one hand under for support and slowly lower the pillow as he slips the bulky satchel out. And as he's doing this, the sleeper stirs and flips over to his side. Jack sits there with his hand under the pillow for 15 minutes, and the man finally falls back into a deep sleep. Jack slips the leather satchel out, leaves the room, and heads back down the steps, quickly and carefully, and slips outside. He goes and plants the cash in a nearby lot and heads back to his room and sleeps. He comes down in the morning for breakfast, and the place is abuzz with talk about the heist. The first thing he hears when he comes down is somebody talking about how they should lynch whoever took the money. The town's going crazy. People are out and running about. Jack comes back into the hotel after eating and sees a constable talking to the hotel porter. One look from the constable tells Jack that he's going to be questioned. Jack braces himself for the examination, and sure enough, he's taken in to be questioned in front of a bunch of people. Police, bosses of the mining company, as well as miners themselves. They ask Jack what his business in town is and why he was seen walking back to his hotel in the wee hours of the morning. Jack laughs in their face and tells them that the bathrooms in the hotel suck, so he went out and handled his business outside and came back. Then they ask him why was he spotted around the depot multiple times, which is like the headquarters for the mining company, and also why was he seen following the agent back to his house the night of the burglary. Jack acts totally offended and tells them that he is a legal Canadian citizen and as a subject of the crown does not need to answer any of these questions. So then another guy, a boss of the mining company, tells Jack that his workers want to lynch somebody and he's not sure if he can keep them at bay. But Jack calls this guy's bluff based on his knowledge of miners. Remember, Jack chills a lot with a lot of types of people, and he's like, dude, miners never want to lynch anybody, according to Jack. So then Jack addresses the crowd and says, this man says you want to lynch me, but before you do it, I want to know why. and a big red-headed Irish miner shouts out, "Don't worry, my boy, there'll be no lynching here." And then Jack tells the guy questioning him, he's like, "I want a telegram sent to the judge of this town right now and let the judge know that the owner of this company is trying to incite violence against me. Just put that out there." And unfortunately, guys, I'm going to cap it right here. Part 5 will take us all the way to the end of the book and maybe some analysis. We'll see. But that's part 4, guys. We're almost done. All right? We're almost done. And then we can do a new book. We'll find out what happens in part 5. Love you.